Hello again. We're going to do science now. Before we begin talking more about plants and seeds, let's just go over how your caterpillars are doing. By now, I think all of you should have 5 chrysalids. Okay, remember the first stage is egg. The second stage, when they come out of the egg as teeny tiny caterpillars, that's called the larvae stage. And now they are in the pupa stage. That's when they have formed their chrysalis. Okay? And if it's one, it's a chrysalis. If it's more than one, which we have 5, it's a chrystalid. So chrystalids. So all of you should have 5 chrysalids now. And here's my journal. Okay, I had 5 yesterday, therefore I still have 5 today. Okay, and then in the butterfly journal, this one, if you have all 5 chrysalids formed, okay, you're going to copy the words I wrote. The chrysalids have formed. They are in the pupa stage now. Okay, so remember I told you one of mine, before it had formed its chrysalid, had fallen. And I knew he was asleep and he wasn't going to climb back up. So I took a leaf from outside and I put it in the bottom of the cup. And I rested him there and he still formed his chrysalid. So, and then the other 4 hanging. And I'll show you mine very carefully. You shouldn't pick yours up at home, because you do not want to disturb them. So, okay, see, 4 are hanging, and 1 is right here on the little leaf I put in there. He still formed his chrysalid. Now, if you're able to get close enough without disturbing them, you might notice that they have some cool gold colors on them. That's what makes them a chrysalis, or one of the reasons, because a moth, you usually see at nighttime, they fly around lights, they build what is called a cocoon, and it's rounder. Ours look a little pointed, so that's one way it's different, and it's kind of dull, like grayish or whitish, whereas ours have a little bit of a point to it, so they're not so rounded, and they have an iridescent color to them. Iridescent is that gold part that you see in your cup. Now you want to be very careful not to disturb them. Let them stay in the cup for a couple of days after they've all formed, and then they can be transferred into the netting, okay? And if while you're transferring them, you notice they start shaking, okay, don't be scared. That's just a defense mechanism. That means it's something that protects them when they're in the wild. Like if they were in a tree, and maybe if a bird came by and wanted to eat it, it would start shaking. So even though it may be in there resting, metamorphosizing, getting ready to change, it still has reflexes. Remember when we talked about our voluntary and involuntary muscles? Like if you touch something hot, you reflex, you involuntary, you don't even think about it, it just happens. So that would be like a reflex for the caterpillars in their chrysalis, because they want to protect themselves. So that's what a defense means. It protects. Defense mechanism is how they protect themselves. So if while your parents are transferring them from the cup into the butterfly netting, and they start shaking, don't get scared. That just means they're protecting themselves. Okay, so now we're going to move on to plants. Now last week we dissected a seed, and I think it's great that some of you took a picture of it and showed me on Seesaw. That was fabulous. Many of you were able to find, you showed me the seed coat, took the seed coat off. Remember, the coat protects what's inside of the seed, and when we did the dissection, I showed you that inside there is what looks like 2 little leaves, and that would be the baby plant. And then attached to that baby plant is called the food part, because just like any baby that is starting to grow, it needs food, okay? And until it starts growing, it won't have any. So this would be its supply of food until it grew more. And that's what we're going to talk about now, what happens here. The ones I have upstairs on my window, I don't know if any of you put them on your window, how I told you with the paper towel and the Ziploc bag with some water in there. You'll see it to start to germinate. Mine is just starting to germinate, so I didn't want to take it down and show you because I want it to continue. And that means it's starting to swell. The heat from the sun and the moisture from the water makes it swell, it makes it get bigger. And if it gets bigger, the coat needs to come off, so then the seed will open up and look like this. So I'm going to draw and explain the poster to you. I'm going to find a good marker. Okay, so when it starts to germinate, the coat comes off. It sheds its coat and the seed splits. Okay, part of the seed that was the food part will start growing upward. Okay, and the part that was, the baby plant, the leaves, the baby plant is growing upward, and the food part is going to grow downward. Okay? If it were in soil, it will grow downward. And guess what those will become? Right, the roots. Okay, the food part will continue growing upward, and that will become the stem. And you'll even see those little leaves still attached. Even this part too, you'll see shrinking as it grows upward. So if you have it on your window, you'll be able to see this happening. That's the cool part of putting it in a Ziploc bag. You can see it happening. Okay, so let's look over here. Inside a seed is a tiny plant, right? We call that the baby part on our seed. The baby part, the tiny plant. A stem and leaves. The plant even has its own food supply. So that's that, right? The food part, that will grow down and become the roots. And the leaves will grow up and become the stem. Okay, here is where in the soil, this is in soil, but if you have it on your window, you'll be able to see it. It starts to shed its coat with some sunlight and some rain. Good soil, water, and sunlight help the plant to begin to grow, and that's called germinate. So here, it's starting to germinate. When it sheds its coat, it's starting to germinate. Okay, the food part will continue to grow down and become an anchor. Those are the roots. And the stem part will grow upward toward the sunlight and the rain, and you'll see the leaves, the baby part growing, and you'll notice on this picture now, the actual bean part of it is starting to get smaller, and those too will become leaves. In each picture, you see more and more growth, and this is actually the same kind of bean that we dissected. It's a lima bean. Okay, and then the plants absorb the sunlight through the leaves. So the leaves catch the sunlight, and the sunlight and the water give nutrients to the rest of the plant, but also from the soil. That's what those roots do. Those roots almost act like a straw, and they bring all the nutrients from the healthy soil up into the stem of the plant and out into the leaves. And some plants flower, and we're going to talk about those too later this week. Okay, this one will grow all leaves. Okay, some plants have flowers which help the plants spread seeds. Okay, remember we talked about how inside a flower, the petals protect the seeds that are in there. And you saw a video clip of how seeds travel, right? When the wind blows, insects, animals, even ourselves, sometimes they get caught in our clothing and we don't know it. We might be walking, the wind blows a seed onto us, we keep walking, and we're planting a seed somewhere and we don't even know it. Okay, so all that information you learned last week about the baby plant, the seed coat, and the food part, now you know what their job is. Their job is to germinate. So given the proper conditions, the sunlight, good soil, and some rain or water, it will start to germinate, shedding its coat, the food part growing down, becoming the roots, the baby plant growing upward, becoming the stem, and then eventually these two little bean parts just disappear and to turn into little leaves. And each time it grows bigger and bigger. Okay, so when a plant can make its own food with the sunlight, it's called photosynthesis. Photo means light, synthesis means to make. And that's how plants can make their own food, using the light from the sun. Photosynthesis, that's how they make their own food and get nourishment from healthy soil. Okay, so now you know how the plant will start to grow, It's called germinate or germination when it starts. So this is another life cycle for you. And when it's grown into an adult plant, it too will have seeds that can then be replanted. It's a cycle. It just happens over and over and over again. Okay, later this week we'll talk about the parts of the plant, a full-grown plant, and the jobs that they have. So what you're going to do is this sequencing page that looks just like this. You'll find how the seed looks first when it's first planted in soil. Remember, the soil. Use your picture clues so you know that the bottom is the soil. Okay, so first the seed is planted, and then look carefully at the details. It starts to germinate. The food part is growing downward, and it germinates further where it's shedding its coat, and it grows upward, now forming the stem. Okay, the coat will totally fall off, and then leaves will grow and more leaves. So you're going to sequence this. All right, boys and girls, I will see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful night.